Casser-Jayne, and welcome to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, a smart, witty, and timely podcast brought to you at a time when Americans are getting fed up with all the shouting and bickering in Washington, D.C. So I, Halli Casser-Jayne, and veteran White House correspondent Matthew Cooper are here to offer you an insightful, engaging journey into the world of politics, always with a smile and dialogue that snap, crackles, and pops. And with our very special guests, we strive to offer a different take on all things politics in our weekly conversations. So pour yourselves a martini, grab a spot on your favorite sofa, and have a listen as we tackle it all and like to stir and sometimes shake things up. On this episode of the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, it's clear we've reached a constitutional crisis. It's the legislative branch against the executive branch. Does democracy win? Is impeachment back on the table? Speaker Pelosi backed into a corner by Donald Trump? Has all of this been a long-term plan of the Republican Party? Carolyn Fredrickson, author of The Democracy Fix, thinks so. These stories and more. And we're just beginning. Here we go. It's crazy. Matt and I decided to go ahead and we're recording this show for you because there's so much going on politically. We want to talk about it, but both he and I and the rest of this country is waiting to find out what happens on tomorrow, Wednesday, with whether or not they're going to throw Barr in jail. Arrest him right on the spot.
I'm the Attorney General in contempt of Congress.
It's my feeling that everything that we're talking about is kind of, everybody is up in arms, a little crazy, a little nervous, a little, they want to know what's going to happen. And so we approach this show knowing that may come. If it does and something really interesting happens, we'll do what we call in our business, a pickup, and we'll add part of the conversation, our take on what happens tomorrow, if it's necessary. So we're going to take it from there. And I'm going to begin with this with you, Matthew. I'm going to say,
yes.
I begin with Democratic rank and file is getting very frustrated with Nadler and Nancy. They are freaked out. They feel that, they're, ironically, the Dems and Trump are doing the same thing. Delay. It's a problem here. And that's what I think it is. Dems were wanting blood and Trump is continuing to obstruct. And that's why whatever happens tomorrow will be meaningful. I guess that's where I'm going with it. Talk to me.
Well, I'm a little wary of trying to figure out where the Democratic populace is, given, these surprising polls that showed Biden crushing everyone. It suggested that a lot of the things that activist Democrats were worried about, did he apologize sufficiently to Anita Hill? Did he apologize enough for the crime bill? Turned out not to matter. Now, that's not the exact same thing as this, but I just try to, differentiate the signal from the noise. Are Democrats really going to pound Pelosi and Nadler for not calling it an impeachment hearing? I don't know. I think they have a little more breathing room to do it.
Well, see, here's what's interesting. I can only gauge it through social media at this point, and on all of my social media sites, they're freaking out. Now, I will grant you, most of the people who spend time on Twitter and on Facebook and on Instagram are people who are, politically intrigued. But okay. But that is a big part of the Democratic voting base. But I'll say this to you. According to some polls, the impeachment favor is waning in the early 2020 states. So there is that poll too, along with, so maybe what you're saying is correct. It's hard to gauge.
We know nationally there's not a huge popular demand for impeachment, and within the party, I don't really feel like I have a good handle on it. You may be right that it's, there's, more energy and maybe more people on that side. And obviously it's something Pelosi has to contend with, but, one step at a time. They gotta get Mueller up there. They gotta get through this, defying subpoenas. Let's, we may be in a different place in 3 weeks.
Well, I'm sure that we will, but here's a question. Is Nancy cornered? I mean,
No.
let me finish with that, because I was going to say, on Tuesday, today, she said the Trump administration is provoking her with all these refusals, to follow the order of subpoenas. What is Trump up to? And I think I heard this best. I like this. The guy comes out of TV, Matt, and when you come out of TV, it's all visual. And the concept of Mueller and all these people testifying would prove devastating to him. Anybody knows that.
Right.
So the other side of it is, on the other hand, he's got the issue with his base only gets revved up if the Dems go ahead and impeach him. So I said, I began with, is Nancy cornered? I think they're both cornered. I think there were traps for both of them.
Nobody has an easy path forward here.
But there is a but here.
Yeah. But I think one of the great questions in America, right, is always whether the people who have the guns will listen to the law, right? Like, will Nixon hand over the tapes, even though the Supreme Court doesn't have an army and can't make them? Yeah, he hands over the tapes. And, does Al Gore leave office, even though the Supreme Court has issued a crazy decision saying stopping the recount? He does. And generally, the rule of law since Marbury v. Madison has prevailed. And now we're going to see what happens next with the Trump years. And I think that's, whether you call it impeachment or not, the big thing is, how much is he going to defy Congress and the courts? And that's
well, I think the difference here is, where in history has somebody this odious had the party so defiantly behind him? That's the difference here in the history of the United States. It has never been quite like this. Yeah.
Well, I think that's right. So I guess my point is, I'd worry less about what's called impeachment, what's just called hearings for now, and look at the defiance. And that's why I think you're wise to say so much is focused on tomorrow, and what the House Judiciary Committee does. So let's see.
It's a fascinating. We're, like I said, this is why I've been making you a little crazy today with what we were doing.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good.
But you've seen my point. I'm just saying, it's clear that at some point this has got to come to, some kind of, it's going to blow up.
Yeah.
And the other thing about Pelosi, she did hold that line with other House Democrats for so long. And now you're starting to even see Democrat, who were with her, the big guys, say, gee, I wasn't with this. I agreed with her. We shouldn't go impeachment. But every day goes by and he's defying, the rule of law.
Right. And look, if they do go impeachment, she can always say, look, it just got so bad. I didn't want to.
Well, yeah, but we had to. But well, what happened with Nixon? People were defiant about Nixon, and he said he wouldn't resign, and then the hearings, which seemed to open up a whole new.
Remember the Watergate hearings, moved other things, moved the country, so they didn't do the impeachment first, right? Like they did all the Senate stuff.
Well, I think that's what her model must have been, but this is a very different situation that we have now.
Totally.
Yeah, because he's so absolutely crazy. The other thing is, and it's one after the other, I said to you, both of them are playing with this crazy clock.
Right.
I find that just totally amusing. I haven't seen anybody else report that, but I think that that's true. They're both on the delay in their own little, cute little ways, if you will.
Exactly.
But we're talking here. There's Barr, there's Mnuchin, there's Gann, and Mueller, and he.
Yeah. And
Mueller,
the interesting. And of course, all these people who are going to have to decide whether I go with Trump on this, right? Like, I wasn't surprised Mnuchin defied Congress on the Trump tax returns. I was a little surprised McGahn, who's now a private citizen, defied Congress.
Did he defy Congress, or was he asked to defy? I wasn't clear on that. I didn't see any statement by him. All I saw was Trump coming down.
Oh, maybe I misread that. Maybe
I didn't see anything from him. I may be wrong on that one, but I didn't see him. That was the White House instructing him. And there's an awful lot of Lawrence Tribe being one of them. They're all out there, all these great lawyers saying, McGahn already gave the goods. They can't go back and say, no, you can't.
Right.
In that
you don't get your privilege back.
You don't get your privilege back. So I guess in that circumstance, it's a little bit, but this is, let's define it. It's a fight between a congressional authority and executive authority. And it's not like we've never been here before, because we have, but this really is maybe one of the most awful things. And what's happened, and you're such a great student of history, there was a time this wouldn't have been quite the way that it is. Unfortunately, Congress has given so much of its power to the executive branch. That's where we are. Yeah,
there's been a lot of deference. There's been a lot of deference, and the president's party is so solidly behind him. I mean, now, Republicans were much more solidly behind Nixon than is commonly remembered, but there was some flexibility from the beginning there. Yeah. And it grew as the facts grew.
It's the cast of characters. I mean, the people who've been elected to Congress really are, I hate to say it, low bar. So many of them. It's really rather sad. I'm sure I'll get beaten up for that remark.
Yeah, well, it's
not Mr. Deeds Goes to Washington. No, we need some. What was his name? It's a Wonderful Life, the great director.
Frank Capra. Yeah.
We need Frank Capra.
We could use some Frank Capra.
We need a Frank Capra. All right, Mr. McConnell. Oh,
he's a
my
lovely
God.
man.
Some people call him Turtle. I call him Bitch McConnell.
Oh, God. You're too much.
I made Matthew laugh.
You always do. So, yes, Bitch McConnell.
So, Bitch McConnell, case closed. I wish his case was closed.
He said, it's all over, people. Move along.
The interesting part about that is that the Republicans actually think that if they say that enough, it's over, and that's the meme that they're going to put through.
Yeah.
And maybe they will. But by the way, while McConnell is up there saying, the case is closed, dear old Pocahontas, if you will, got her tomahawks out, if you'll forgive me.
Oh, right. No, she's on the warpath.
I mean, but God bless her. She sat there and she read the Mueller report and all the horror that Trump has done, which is behind all of this. It was really a hilarious moment on the one hand, if you look at it. The bitch is carrying on, case closed. And she's going, oh, really? Well, maybe we all ought to read this, because I bet you haven't read it, Mr. McConnell, or anybody else on the floor of the Senate. So, anyway, that was a pretty funny moment. But what I wanted to talk to you about is the letter from the bipartisan prosecutors.
Yeah, quite something.
Do you know how many have signed it now?
400, 500?
Today it's up to 700.
Yeah, that's an extraordinary number of prosecutors.
The president is a felon. He obstructed justice, they say, and if it was anybody else, they'd be in the pokey.
He'd be charged.
He'd be in jail.
Yeah.
So I think that has not gotten enough press, that letter.
Yeah, I agree. Look, yeah. I think what you see in the report's pretty clear there, but
but when it went from 3, and by the way, and it is bipartisan. Yeah. And it's career people. It's really a great mix. Unfortunately, we'll have to see what happens with that, because if it goes up higher than 700 tomorrow, if it hits that 1,000 mark, I don't see how the press doesn't start to really run with that in a big, bold way. It's my thought there.
I don't know. I think they I hope they do, but I'm not sure it'll go anywhere. I mean, the argument that if he wasn't the president, he would be indicted for obstruction, I think, has kind of been out there. This confirms it.
No, there's something different here. Let me tell you.
What else is going to happen?
Because the difference here is that what they're saying is the Mueller report was written so that this guy would be tried, whether it's politically in an impeachment hearing or later. Right. And I think that's the difference. And I think that's what they said. The president is a felon. And that was what their point was. In other words, they're on the side of, you got to impeach
I think you need Mueller to say that.
I don't think Mueller will ever say it.
But he probably won't say it, right?
No. I don't think Mueller has.
That's not his thing.
listen, you know I wasn't his big fan. I was pretty ticked off about the way he handled this. Said it right here on the airwaves. I still feel that way. The fact that he wrote 2 letters is interesting to Mr. Barr, his good buddy.
And leaked them.
Well, yeah. Maybe he's got more, cojones than we think he has.
I don't think he's lacking cojones. I think he's, that's not really the way to think
Well, that's not fair. You're a guy.
It's not fair. He has an approach that's, like the opposite of Ken Starr. He's not gonna crusade. He's not gonna whine. He's not gonna stretch the law. He's not gonna expand the indictments to include things that have, are 100 miles away.
You'd think the guy was a Democrat. Let me tell you why I say that. And he's not. He's a Republican. But you'd think he was a Democrat, and here's why. Because the problem with the Democratic Party right now and through all of this is they keep acting as if they have one hand tied behind their back and a gun along with the hand at their back. They are always doing that. That is always the way Debs operate. Republicans, they got weapons of mass destruction and they're just pointing them all at you.
Yeah.
So if this were anybody else on the Republican side, right. This guy acts, like I said, like a Democrat. He does it above board. He plays by the rules in an environment where nobody should be playing by any rules. I am sorry. Because the next thing I'm going to say to you is my opinion. Yeah. Up till now, I want to hear what you have to say. Trump has just run rings around everybody. He's won every battle. Tell me when he's lost.
Yeah, I mean, he's the only thing you can say is that he's just not very popular for a guy who should be more popular. Any president who had this kind of economy should be popular.
He's popular enough to get reelected.
He is very close to that. I agree.
So tell me one time that anybody has won their battle with him. Give me one, please.
Yeah.
So it's a problem.
I'm not disagreeing.
No, I know. But the point being, the reason that he keeps winning is because he's playing by no rules, and the Democrats and the rest of the government are playing by rules.
Right. I don't disagree with that. And this has been true of Republicans for a while.
Well, in fact, the second part of the show today is all about that. You guys really need to stick and stay forward because I got a great guest who's going to talk about how Dems need to change the program really quick and how where we are today has been a long time in the making. Okay, that's for the second half hour. But where we are today, right now, is it's an issue, and I don't know how Dems change who they are at their core right now. Let's change gears. Ready?
I'm here.
Ta-ta, Chris.
Ready to change.
Ta-ta, Chris Wray. He's out of here. FBI director today, talking to Senator Shane, says what? Says he doesn't see anything about spying. It's like, yeah, well, hello. Blew Trump's whole new meme right out the window by the head of the FBI. I think his direct quote was, she asked Wray whether he considers adequately predicated surveillance spying. That's not the term I would use, Wray responded. He said, different people use different colloquial phrases. She said, do you have any evidence of illegal surveillance in the 2016 campaign? He says, I don't think I personally have any evidence of that sort. And it goes on from there. But I'm jumping ahead a little because I really wanted to hear what you have to say about this. He also said that the Russians are certainly intending to meddle in the 2020 election. He says he doesn't know whether that effort will be like 2016. Listen to this quote, Matt, that favored Trump's election.
Yeah.
I read that as Trump wouldn't be president without the Russian meddling.
I wouldn't quite read it that way, but just the fact that he's willing to echo the intelligence community by saying that they were doing it on Trump's behalf is.
But favor Trump's election, not favor Hillary's. Trump won. I find that a very extraordinary statement from the FBI director.
Yeah, I guess I just don't read it the same way you do. But
well, that's okay. That's okay.
Regardless, look, he's like Dan Coates and what we thought Rod Rosenstein was like. Like he's clearly trying to tell the truth, and not piss off the boss at the same time. And, I think he knows he's got job security.
I don't know. I guarantee you that.
And I don't think he really cares. Like, I think he's not going to.
I think Trump is going to go ape a shitta over
But he's
that.
not going to fire another FBI director over this.
Well, you don't. But you
I
wouldn't. A normal president wouldn't.
No, it's true. Every time the words like that come out of my mouth,
you kind of got to go.
I want to bring them back in.
You're a sweetheart.
Because then
Totally
I think, of course he would.
Yeah, of course he would. Let's jump ahead to the presidential race. First of all, this Biden thing is ridiculous. Who knew? Huge numbers. On the other hand, Trump's numbers are up too. Go figure.
Yeah. Well, I think obviously it's all going to change. It's a long way away.
I don't think it's going to change the numbers that he has. Come on, those are just ridiculous, and he's hitting everybody.
Well, the first time he forgets a word, there's going to be.
Well, they'll come after him. There's no question. But you know who his secret? Yeah, you know who his secret weapon is?
Barack Obama.
No, Jill. That Jill Biden is a very special woman. She today said it was time to move on from his handling of the Anita Hill hearing,
I saw
and
a lot.
the room went
Speaking of
silent.
social media.
Say what?
Well, yeah, all the feminist authors I follow were very upset.
Well, they've been upset right along. My answer to them is, why do you keep picking on Biden? Suppose you would go after Mr. Clarence Thomas. Yeah, you don't seem to be as angry with him. At least Biden at the end, passed legislation to, try and clean it all up, as best as he could. Clarence went to the Supreme Court and rarely speaks a word.
Yeah. Well, it gave me a little hope the party is not as crazy as the people on Twitter.
Well, you think that Biden should be held on account on that? I just don't. No.
I'm saying I'm glad that he polled very high. I think it makes you look at the race in a new way, I think.
Well, I think the only thing worries me that this is another situation where, the party anointed Hillary.
Yeah, I'm not saying he should be the nominee or I want him to be the nominee, but I think it upset the idea that, only the most woke person was going to win.
Right. And the youngest and the left. And
you just, it had to be a gay trans Ukrainian,
I think it's fascinating because I think he's going to, I think he's surprising everybody, and he's playing it very smart because he's not doing a lot of talking to the press. He's surrounded by his bodyguards. He only says what he wants to say.
Well, that opening day was very good.
Yeah, and he's playing it for all it's worth. Now let me ask you.
And he's not doing a full grovel.
No.
Which I thought he would do a full grovel.
No. I think he has much more, I think people are going to find that he's a lot tougher than he's ever made himself out to be. That's what I think.
Yeah.
He did the vice president thing, and he was very effective at that. Brilliantly effective. Maybe one of the best vice presidents in our time. That being said, right, that was a role too. Now he's into a different role. And I think he wasn't ready for that role before. I think he might be ready for it now. And whether he gets it isn't the point, but he's stately. He's a statesman. Is Bernie Sanders done? Cooked?
No.
You think he still has a chance?
Yes.
Oh.
I do. I think he still represents the hopes and aspirations of a lot of people in the party. I think he's got a kind of delicate grabbing operation that's going to be formidable if he can hang in there. And I don't think he's disappearing. He's pretty good in debates. I don't think he has a
chance in hell. I think his time has come and gone. He's been somehow reduced. My instincts tell me he's been reduced.
You could be right.
He's
Look,
kind of, I don't want to say clown, but you know what I mean by reduced. Stature is something. I don't know. Talk to me.
When the field is this big, nobody has, better than even odds of getting this. It's very tough.
I think a lot of those people who are in there don't have a Chinaman's chance in hell, and that's the way that it goes.
I don't think that's considered a good phrase anymore.
Oh, did I say a politically incorrect phrase?
It's okay. I never really understood what it meant.
Chinaman's chance in hell.
Or just Chinaman's chance. I never knew what that meant. Why?
I'll have to go back and look that one up.
I always thought it was a weird phrase, but
I'm not sure why it's. I don't like politically correct. It pisses me off. So
I know. So
I have a problem with that. But
anyway, this Let's,
wait
I've
to
been
see.
saying for weeks, I thought Warren was underrated. She's not. I still think she's
not
got a lot of
underrated,
juice.
but forgive me, I still think with her, she makes one of the great cabinet heads. The woman's brilliant. She's brilliant. She's divisive.
So, I'm going to have to start asking you each week. I'm going to give you one pairing, one ridiculous pairing. And you're going to have to make a snap judgment.
Go ahead. What's the pairing? Who's the pairing?
Bennett or Castro? Who do you like more?
God. For different reasons. The word like is getting in the way of my answering you.
Okay.
Because Castro is a lot. Are you talking Julian, or whichever one is the brother?
Yeah, the one that's in the race.
Yeah. No, he's a lovely, lovely man. He really is. And he's no idiot, that's for sure. But he's not presidential. And Bennett, you want to knock him on the head and go, stop.
Yeah, please stop now.
Just stop. He's just, wow. He's all actor. So that's my whatever. But we have to move to this one.
Yeah, let's move
This week in anti-Semitism.
This week in anti-Semitism.
Oh, my God. Listen to me. There is a horrible, horrible, horrible situation in Israel. For those who don't know, 500 bombs go off, or whatever they're calling them these days, but they're bombs sent from Gaza, by Hamas and they have different letters and different names every week when this crap starts up. PID, PI, whatever. But they're all Palestinian, factions. Kill how many Jews in Israel? 2? Was it 5? I lost count.
Yeah, maybe 4. And anyway, it's
And on the Palestinian side, they started it. Some of their bombs came back. Didn't quite get as far as they were supposed to go and killed some Palestinians, which they tried to blame Israel on. Israel hits back because that's what you do when your country is attacked, and they were the attackers. And good old Ilhan Omar went on another rant. First of all, she called it the occupation. Excuse me, but Gaza was turned over to the Palestinians, 30 years ago?
No, about 14 years
14 years ago? Whatever the hell it was. This woman, she's doing herself no good, and she can't stop. She uses certain phrases that are just, you may not agree with me, but I'm starting to get really annoyed with her. I feel, Matthew, she elected herself got herself elected falsely, and what she actually is a Palestinian lobbyist within Congress. Talk to me.
She's not a very effective one, if she is. But look, she's clearly she's not chastened at all by what's happened to her this spring in terms of the anti-Semitic comments, and she wanted to dive right into this, and she did, as did Tlaib, the Palestinian congresswoman from Michigan.
It's odd.
But to tell you the truth, I was a little less sort of interested in them than what's happening on the ground, because I think it's really very complicated and interesting.
Well,
situation right
nothing
now.
New there.
I think there are a lot of actually factors that are kind of different. I think Iran is playing a heavier hand than they had in the past. I think Israel's kind of going to be on the world stage with the Eurovision contest coming to Israel, which is a big deal.
The young'un is about to talk to us about his peace plan.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the Gulf states don't care.
No, the Gulf states are with Israel right now.
The Gulf states are with Israel.
Yeah.
The Iranians are pushing. I'm sure Fatah would like to finally see, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the Egyptians are doing a lot to try to tamp this down. So
it's a different situation. I think that people don't understand how different it is, Matt, because I think all the points you make are quite valid and very good points. It's not the same situation. That being said, and Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib don't quite fit in to this conversation. And they're certainly not helpful to it.
No. And look, there's, whatever you want to criticize Israel, there's always plenty to criticize. But that's not what they're doing. They're just stirring the pot.
It's called anti-Semitism, This Week in Anti-Semitism.
It's this week. We have to get new anti-Semites in the mix, though, I feel like.
Well, okay. I just wanted to throw something out. I don't know if you saw it because it was a very small story, didn't get a lot of play, but Rashida Tlaib's father attacked her, that she lied about her residence, and she was living... And he went on a tirade. My daughter's a liar, and this is not how I brought her up to be, and...
She doesn't live in the district, or...?
Well, she didn't at the time that she was running.
Interesting.
So I don't understand that story. And it didn't get a lot of play because so much is going on that people aren't paying attention to, right? We both know that. So that was one of them, and I don't know why I came across it, but I did. There's a lot more to talk about, and we're running out of time as usual. I'm just going to say we're going to have to talk about that U.S.-Iran tension thing, I think, next week. The China tension.
And North Korea.
And North Korea and Vladimir Putin in a conversation the president had with him in which he said nothing about the election.
There was just a bro talk. Two bros kicking back.
But let me end on these three. Poor old Michael Cohen went to the pokey in a Cadillac, by the way.
Yeah, nice Escalade up to the mountains.
Escalade. All the way up to his mountain retreat.
Yeah.
Just in time for... just in time for Shabbat.
Exactly.
Okay. How about Tiger Woods?
Well,
the Medal of Freedom?
Usually
for playing golf and cheating on his wife.
One big ceremony, where they have all the Nobel laureates and the great actors and actresses and the writers and they don't dull them out like one at a time but it makes you wonder who's going to get up there next, some New York developers. What
did I read? He the only person to win the Medal of Freedom for playing golf for a fee. And for playing golf and cheating on his wife at the same time.
Sure. There's that. I mean, he's weird.
How did they let him do that? That's all I want to say. And why did Tiger Woods stand up there, by the way, and look like something he shouldn't have allowed himself to be used that way?
Well, after 10 years of losing your endorsements and having pictures.
Well, all right. So he won. He's a great golfer. Terrific.
Yeah, you just want to. Yeah, I'm sure no one's ever turned down that medal.
Well, I don't know that anybody has quite Tiger Woods has been offered that medal. So.
Right.
Hello.
I think 2 years from now we'll think that was one of his better choices for a medal after he gives it to Steve Bannon.
That's a scary thought. That's a totally frightening, terrifying.
Lindsey Graham.
Don't. Oh, please. Graham Cracker.
Rudy Giuliani. He's going to give it to Rudy.
Oh God. Oh God. Rudy Giuliani.
Posthumously to Roy Cohen.
Please. Well, how about Roger Stone after he pardons him?
Right. There you go.
I mean, come on. That's going to be a haul of crazy. NBC Wall Street Journal poll. This is depressing, but I read it. Democrats' 2018 enthusiasm advantage is, in big, big letters, gone. Yeah. Republicans have erased the Democrats' aforementioned enthusiasm gap. Totally. Is that a poll we should trust?
Yeah, that's a good poll.
That's a good poll. That's pretty frightening, scary. Oh my God. Whatever. Is there anything else that you have to tell me? You have to say? My voice is going today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We always cover a lot of ground.
I know, we did. We kept it moving.
Who would have thought? Not the Chinaman in hell.
All right. And next week, we'll do Next Week in Anti-Semitism.
All right, darling. It's been swell, as it always is.
Right. Talk to you soon.
Lovely talking to you. Goodbye.
Lovely talking to you. Bye.
You were listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern at hallicasserjayne.com and is available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Be sure to find us on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, iHeart Podcasts, on all your favorite apps. You can find the Halli Casser-Jayne Show on your Alexa device too. Just say the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Oh, and come play with me on Twitter at the Halli CJ Show. Carolyn Fredrickson. You may not know her name, but you need to know her work, and about her new book, The Democracy Fix: How to Win the Fight for Fair Rules, Fair Courts, and Fair Elections. Fredrickson, a progressive activist and attorney, has served as the director of the ACLU's Washington Legislative Office and as general counsel and legal director of NARAL, Pro-Choice America. In addition, Caroline was chief of staff to Senator Maria Cantwell and deputy chief of staff to then Senate Democratic leader Tom Daschle. During the Clinton administration, she served as special counsel to the President for Legislative Affairs. Along her journey, she learned a lot about politics as chronicled and brilliantly analyzed in The Democracy Fix: How the Right has seized power at every level of government by ruthlessly focusing on building intellectual capital, winning elections, selecting judges, changing legal rules, promoting fake news, gerrymandering, and suppressing the vote, while the left has sat back and watched as if their hands were tied behind their backs. The solution? Let's talk with Caroline Fredrickson. Nice to have you here. Thanks so very, very much. What an interesting book you have written. You actually wrote on something that I've been... Yeah, you're quite welcome. You wrote about something I've been thinking a lot about lately. Let's start here. The title of the book is The Democracy Fix. I have to ask you, is democracy broken?
It is, unfortunately, or at least it's getting there. What we have is a situation where the basic tools of democracy, elections, and courts to enforce fair procedures are inhibited by basically what we call sleazeball tactics, efforts on the right to really disrupt the proper functioning of our democratic process.
So something that I alluded to in my introduction to you, which you couldn't hear, and I'm going to say that flat out. The Republicans play hardball, the Democrats play softball. I mean, if you just watch how, Jerry Nadler's been handling the Trump obstruction thing, threatening to subpoena, threatening, doing nothing. You have to start there, I think. And you might not agree with me, but talk to me.
Oh, no, that's really the premise of the book is that, I don't think that the left should sink down to the sleazy tactics of the right, but I think we need to be as hard-edged and fight as hard as they do. Because right now, there's a real asymmetric polarization. You see that that on the right, people fight really hard, push really hard for their goals, think long-term, and on the left, it's just kind of distracted and diffuse, and there's no strategic plan, and there's really not the kind of fierce engagement that there is on the right.
How many rat holes can we go down on that one?
Lots of them.
Right. Let me move to this. You see the Republicans have been up to, stripping voters' rights, watering down election laws, dark money, conservative radio. What do you think is their, I'm going to put it in quotes, gift?
Well, I think their gift is that they understand that you don't actually win by thinking about your policy details first. You win by getting power and then implementing your policy. And we've got it backwards. I think on the left we spend a lot of time debating all the minutia of a variety of different approaches to, very important policies, but we're not thinking about how do we actually get power so that we can implement these ideas. Climate change is a disaster facing this country. But if we end up quibbling so much about a whole variety of policy issues without thinking at the same time about how to win elections, how to hold on to power, how to make sure the court system is fair so that, these good policies don't get struck down by the courts, then, what's the point?
Their strategies aren't new. That's
not at all.
Right. And that's what irritates me because, as we will talk in a minute, this has been going on for a long time. I'm wondering why you were finally the first person to put it in book form that people can imbibe and understand, and look at. They learned, as you said, that power precedes policy, not the other way around. And I'm wondering, is it too late? They own so much. And what was your line? I kept reading the book. They strive to lock in power. Are they locked in?
Well, here's the thing, nearly so. Let's take the last election in North Carolina for the House election. They have 13 seats in the House for the North Carolina. And Democrats won almost 50% of the vote overall for the state, and Republicans just a little over 50%. But you know what? Somehow out of those 13 seats, the Republicans got at least 9 of them. And I say at least 9 because there's one that's still
up for grabs
because they're playing their usual sleazy tactics with that one. But just think of that, 50% of the vote and 9 out of 13 seats, or 10 potentially. So that means that for Democrats or the left to actually be successful, we have to have supermajority. So it's not impossible, but that last election was, people called that a blue wave. And look what happened in North Carolina. So that is unfortunately the picture in a lot of places in this country. Now, I would say it's not hopeless because there are people across the spectrum, and certainly there are enough people in many states who want to have, a nonpartisan process for picking their elected officials. For setting the districts for the elected officials. And so in a number of states, people have taken the power out of the hands of the politicians and passed nonpartisan redistricting ballot initiatives to set up a commission that will actually look holistically at the state and make sure that there's, if you've got about 50% Republicans, you get about 50% of the seats. That's fair to everybody. So it's not hopeless, but I think, until the left starts thinking about that, like, how do we attack this? Nonpartisan redistricting is a process that I think is a really important one because unlike just flipping the gerrymandering to the Democratic side, it's a lot harder to undo because you have people, as I said, across the spectrum representing the broad swath of the public in a state who wanted that system. I come out of a background where I worked for Democratic politicians, but I'm not a believer that the Democrats can be trusted. Well, they can be trusted somewhat more than the Republicans right now, for sure. But in the long term, this can't be a partisan issue. This has to be an issue about democracy. There's a little problem with that, and I'm going to address that now, and that is, what is at the core of all of this? I mean, who is this Republican Party, and what are they really all about? There are a lot of people who believe that at the core it's about racism, maybe even sexism. The good old boy network is fighting for its life. Soon there are going to be more people of color in this country, than whites voting. And that strikes me as bizarre that things have turned the way they are in that circumstance. There are more of, quote unquote, us than there are of them. What do you say to that? Well, I agree with you entirely with your analysis about sort of what's behind this. And in fact, one of the, I got to do some really interesting research for this book, frightening as it was, but in looking back at the sort of some of the origins of, the kind of Reagan Democrat as it was originally sort of denominated, the kind of the white working class guy, in the kind of Midwest. And there was this very important tactical alliance that happened between kind of the forces of corporate America led by the Chamber of Commerce and the kind of social, evangelical religious right, and recognizing that the corporations had the money and the religious right actually could speak to these people who were anxious. And, it was particularly about race, and it was about issues involving women, reproductive rights, and women in the workplace. And so, what they did was they used the rhetoric of abortion and busing and school prayer and all that to strip away these working class voters from the Democratic Party. And what we're seeing now is really a logical conclusion of that. It's playing on these racial fears, playing on fears about gender, and getting, in the meantime, people to vote against, what we've all, people have said, why do they vote against their interests? Well, getting them to vote against their interests was all about playing to their fears, about playing to these sort of race and gender fears, as I said, sort of, to get them to support the agenda of the Chamber of Commerce, huge tax cuts for the wealthy and for corporations, sending jobs overseas, ruining their communities, poisoning their water, and so on. So the genesis of that has been long in coming, and it's been very much a product of a determined effort by the leaders, sort of a top-down effort to bring it over these voters. God, so many things come to mind here. First of all, I want to talk about the Powell memo because I think that's what 1971 is where it kind of all comes together. But I have to say, just think about what this is. Caroline, this is so crazy sick. This is so evil. Could it be any? Yeah. Could it be any darker than no? People kind of scoff at this. But you can't. I it's just. I think for one thing, I think it's important to see what Lewis Powell, what motivated him, and so just so that your listeners, talk about know. He was a lawyer in Richmond, Virginia, and he worked for Philip Morris, a big tobacco lawyer. He also worked with the Chamber of Commerce. He sat on the committees. And at the time that Ralph Nader and other consumer and environmental lawyers were having some success in the courts, and there was kind of a American uprising for environmental protections, and Earth Day was established, and Richard Nixon actually set up the Environmental Protection Administration. There was lawsuits against the dangerous cars, and corporations actually started to be held somewhat accountable. Well, Lewis Powell saw that this was a terrible moment, and that this was the collapse of capitalism, and so he wrote this memo, and it's about 40 pages. It's incredibly detailed in sort of a prescription for what corporate America needed to do to protect their interests. And it involved, this idea that, you don't invest just for the next election or for tomorrow. And what you think about is how to hold power for the long term. How do you claim it and how do you keep it? And so, he analyzed the different sectors. The legal sector, meaning the courts. We have to own the courts. That means getting the judges, and it also means giving them the legal doctrine to apply. And it also means shutting the courthouse doors on all those consumer and environmental lawyers, not to mention labor lawyers and civil rights lawyers. So, and then it was, how do we own the media and create our own media on the right and undermine the traditional media, and then create think tanks to disseminate our ideas in a kind of a plausible way, and then develop electoral strategies, which mean not just selling voters on our platform, but actually changing the composition of the electorate. So through vote suppression, and through efforts to make the districts, tailor them so that Republicans win as many as possible. And, they did it. And, what he said was we need to have, long-term, methodical, consistent, high-level funding and coordination. And they did. And we just have to look around and see how successful they've been.
Well, wait a minute. Let me correct you on one thing.
After another.
Yeah, let me correct you on one thing. You said, and they did. And they do. Mm-hmm. Can we bring it to present?
They do, yes.
And they do. I think that's really
do. Thank you.
Right. And the reason I wanted to go to they do, because I want to talk about the Koch brothers. And they represent all of this, Every decision that is made for the corporation. No decisions are made for the people. None. Zero. You can see it. Mm-hmm. You can and what irritates the hell out of me, and I know you said it before, but I want to get back to it, is what is wrong with the voters themselves? What is wrong with, the rank and file? What is wrong with these people? This tax cut that they did, it's already showing up in the polls. It may be the saving grace at the end of the day, by the way, because the fact of the matter is it isn't hitting the little guy. It's not hitting him at all. And they know it. And so, Trump can't even actually run re-election, it appears at this point, on the economy, because the voters that he need, even the Iowa farmers, are getting murdered by him. You got something there?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is a long-term problem, but I think one of the things that I'm convinced of that, for the left to win, they actually have to have progressive policies, and they have to fight for them, and as I said, build that infrastructure. If the white working class wants to come along, then that's great. But I think we need to make sure that the people who have the right to vote can vote, that the districts are fairly structured and the courts are representative, and actually apply the law as meant, anti-discrimination laws and the voting rights laws instead of to convenience the Republicans. Not to say we shouldn't care. I think we need to have economic policies that are actually, inclusive and help struggling families across the country. But I think it's a mistake to tailor, what we do to try and get those people back, to understand a progressive vision.
I see.
What I think we have to have is a progressive vision, and they will come along. But we can't do it in the opposite order.
Well, I'm not sure that I totally agree with that, but I will say this. One of the big problems, for instance, Stacey Abrams just announced that she's not going to run for the Senate seat. And who knows where she plans to go there. But, there's that little problem in Georgia, which is why she's not, the senator now. And the same one you're talking about in North Carolina. And those are infrastructure problems the Democratic Party has because it does not fight back when that kind of stuff is going on. What happened in Georgia, and that this bozo was now the governor, and it just drifted off into history. What the?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you a story about that I talk about in my book. the democracy fix, which involves just that kind of playing real hardball on the right. So we had a census in 2010 and redistricting. And before that, Karl Rove, right-wing political operative, basically announced in the Wall Street Journal, hi, I'm setting up this program called Red Map. I'm going to help flip enough state houses so before redistricting that we can control Congress for a long time. So he writes a piece for the Wall Street Journal. Do the Democrats do anything to kind of counter that? No. He basically raises a fairly small amount of money in the grand scheme of political campaigns. I think it was about $30 million. They targeted, 4 or 5 critical state houses, kind of the central, center part of the United States, and, places where there was a Republican governor and just a few seats in contention that would flip the state house. And, they won every single one of those. It was a very targeted investment. And then, when redistricting came around, they drew some really lovely districts for the Republicans, and they've lasted, for 10 years, except where there have been court challenges based on actual proof of discrimination, which is really hard. But then you see what happened in all the subsequent elections, 2012, 2014, and 2016 is still playing out. And then the North Carolina example I gave you, you see that, it's still in effect. Those districts that they drew, that Karl Rove helped draw through his Red Map program, are still distorting representation in not just in the House of Representatives, but in the state houses. And that's why they pass all these voter suppression laws and why they continue to engage in incredibly aggressive gerrymandering. So it's exactly the lesson that I want the left to draw, which is, I don't think we should actually do gerrymandering for Democrats, because I think that the Democrats with a small d, those of us who believe in democracy, will actually help the Democrats with a big D win by drawing fair districts, because I think that, history's on their side, as you said, and it's also our values, which are not supposed to be designed to strip people of their right to vote and have the elected official of their choosing. I think we can both be consistent with our values and actually have a significant positive outcome and impact on elections by following them. But we have to engage, right? That actually is real politics. It might mean that in the short term we work to elect Democrats in the state houses so that they set up nonpartisan redistricting, but it may mean that there are ballot initiatives.
Well, I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think it's possible to do both. But I want to bring this up to you. You've worked with some extraordinary people. I mean, Tom Daschle. Oh my God, Maria Cantwell. But here's where I want to go with this: American Idol, IDLE, or not Idol, IDOL. What's with Dem leadership? I'm not sure the right people are in charge. I don't hear people talk about this, but I do think that may be an issue in the party. Now, I'm watching Nancy Pelosi, for instance, and I love her to death, and on some things she's been terrific. But I wonder whether in these dog-eat-dog times, it doesn't mean you got to give up your moral turpitude, because I'm with you on that. You got to maintain to some degree, but something's not right here in this leadership. They are just not fighters.
Well, I mean, I think it's just reflective of overall of the left. Again, I think it's we have kind of short-term vision. And we're too timid. And, so I think you got to fight hard for your values. I mean, I don't think we have to be sleazy, but I think we have to fight. I mean, being sleazy is not why you fight. It's because you believe in your goal. And so I think the general dismay that we all feel is that overall the elected leadership is not seizing the reins, is not attempting to fight hard, is not is still too timid, and at all of the moments when we all need stand up aggressive leadership. There's also this problem with that our democracy is so under threat. But
there's also the problem with the Democratic Party, and that is they eat their own. I mean, I'm sorry, but they do, and that's an issue. That's a huge, huge issue. Look, the Kavanaugh appointment, that's changed, and the Merrick Garland has changed, the Supreme Court. That's an issue. We know that Democrats have tried to get in on the radio trip. Al Gore tried Current TV. that was a big fail. Democrats don't like to listen. I'm convinced of that. We have to unrig the system. That's what you said. And you actually have ideas about this thing. But I also want to talk about Citizens United because that's a big issue too. And they won that game. So that dark money that's in there. So how do we unrig, my friend? How do we unrig?
Well, look, I mean, I think number one, and really the most important prescription, is not to forget about building for the long term and about investing in institutions and caring about institutions. And by that, I mean, again, I do think, as you said, we can walk and chew gum. We can care about climate change and think about, policies to deal with that. But we really cannot forget about the courts. And this has been a constant failing on the left of not caring about state courts, of not caring about the federal courts. Merrick Garland didn't get confirmed in part because the Democratic left didn't rise up. They didn't do much to support Merrick Garland and support Obama in his nomination. And Obama himself, he was pretty weak over his 8 years in terms of nominating and getting people confirmed. He left his first 2 years when they actually had a Democratic majority in the Senate, basically didn't do anything to get judges confirmed.
I agree.
So, number one is thinking about how do we make sure that we are engaged around the courts and for the long term, because this is a long-term process. We work with law students and young lawyers across the country in my organization, the American Constitution Society. They're nurturing and getting them ready to take on roles of importance. That takes, sometimes decades. And on the right, they had the patience for that. They had the patience to nurture and create a pipeline for their activist right-wing lawyers and law students, and they gave them legal doctrine to deploy, got them on the bench, and look what's happened. And so you mentioned Citizens United. That's a direct through line of the right-wing legal forces getting the people they wanted on the court. And then saying, guess what, let's tear down campaign finance reform laws. And so they did. So, we have to think both in the short term, and that is, how do you address it as quickly as possible? There's tax law reform in terms of how do you need, and I talk about this in the book, C4s, the source of the dark money. Those need to be reformed. President Obama thought about it, never did it. That needs to happen. Congress, has passed transparency rules. They need to be enforced. And strengthened. Even in the absence of overturning Citizens United, candidates could be forced to disclose their donors. Independent expenditures could be actually transparent so that when the Koch brothers are running that ad, it says, right. Americans for a cleaner future, and it's actually the oil business. Who is running that ad. So there are things we can do on an incremental basis, which are going to help in small donor campaign financing, which is happening at some state and local levels. And then, in the long term, we got to get the courts back, and we need to overturn Citizens United. It's just wrong on the law, and we need to make sure that that we actually have a First Amendment that protects people's real free expression, which is who I want to vote for to represent me, as opposed to how much do my dollars buy.
I hear all that, but I'm going to tell you what I think is the biggest problem. And I think the difference between besides the wimpishness versus, they'll kill anybody to get what they want, the Republicans. But I think there's another problem. That is the Republicans tell their voters what to vote for and how to vote and what to say and what to tweet. And the Democrats, it's the other way around. It's the party, it's the voters who tell the leadership what they want. That's why I think it's a failure of Dem leadership. We don't have it. I'm all for democracy, but there's got to be a leader. And until somebody really
absolutely.
Until somebody really strong gets up there and out there, this doesn't get better.
It's across the sort of the different sets of institutions. Because you see this even on the right in terms of, how hierarchical they are in their funding structures. Mm-hmm. The groups that they want, the groups that focus on the courts, the think tanks, the media organizations, and the electoral strategies and legislative strategies like ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Commission, those are organizations that have been funded for a long time. The big funders, the Koch brothers, the Mercers, and the Bradleys, and the others, they get together. They have a very coordinated strategy, and they're going to fund those groups for a long term. They get big and strong And on the left, it's the same kind of thing that you're talking about. It's just sort of, it's diffuse, it's the momentary engagement, it's we move from one thing to another. And so we don't have the same kind of powerful, big, politically relevant organizations in the same way, like the Heritage Foundation. And so that is, I think, it's just a similar tendency. And I think that's what we have to actually be serious about our politics. Some of it is going to have to mean we coordinate a lot better. We have to have better aligned strategies. We have to think about what happens 10 years from now, not just what happens next week.
Well, until like I said, I think until at such time as we get, a leader, a true leader of the party. And we haven't had one in a while. We've had great presidents, don't misunderstand me, but we really need a strong leader. I don't think much of this is going to be able to change because it's just too diffuse, as you say. Nice to talk to you. What a terrific book. Thank you.
Thank you. It was great to talk to you.
You too. Bye-bye. I've been speaking with author Caroline Fredrickson. Her book is The Democracy Fix, How to Win the Fight for Fair Rules, Fair Courts, and Fair Elections. For more information, visit thenewpress.authors/CarolineFredrickson.com. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show is a production of Resec, LLC. Be sure to tune in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show at hallicasserjayne.com or listen on your favorite app. New podcasts are posted Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern.